Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Kellen Klein, and I'm the course manager of the Center for Humane Technology. I'd like to welcome you all to this event, What We're Learning. This is a showcase of what our course community and the people in it are learning about humane technology. If this is your first event, welcome. This event is provided to all members of the Foundations of Humane Technology course community. If you are just learning about our course, if you've just joined our course, we hold these events regularly, and we're really excited to have you join them. You don't have to be finished with our course in order to participate in these events. And we have folks participating from around the world today. I am really excited because this is one of the events where we get to showcase not the CHT team, not external people, but actually what is coming out of our course community and how we can be supporting one another as we all try to catalyze a humane future and build a global movement, really looking at tech reform and how to build better humane technology. Today, I am very excited to be joined by four presenters in particular: Deborah, Ryan, Alexandra, and Tarini from around the world. Three of them actually from the United States, Tarini from India, who are going to be presenting their own research or the research that they're currently working on or planning to launch into around various humane technology themes. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Ryan Wold from Minneapolis in the United States up onto the stage. Oh, here he comes. There he is.
Hello.
Hey, Ryan. You made it.
Right,
you were the first guinea pig, so there was bound to be a little trial and error, right? Good to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kellen. And thank you all for being here, members of the Foundation's course community. My name is Ryan Wold. I'm excited to share with you a framework for advancing humane technology, and then I'll provide an example of how I've applied this in my own work. So it's an exploration of humane mentor programs. So my overview of the presentation today, first I'm going to be talking about what is the problem that kind of brings the Center for Humane Technology community together. So what is it that we're all concerned about when we talk about the need for humane technology? Then I'll provide a framework for how we can think about addressing that problem that we're all concerned about. And then I'll share an example of how I'm doing this in my own research. And four, I'll share a little bit about how the course community can support this work if you're interested in doing so. So first, what is the problem that we're addressing? So when we talk about the need for humane technology or digital technology, what are we addressing? What specifically are we talking about? After spending time researching and thinking about this, I've settled on this term that I've come up with called the technologization of complex social phenomena. So this is the process of a technology gradually playing a more central role in facilitating significant individual decisions for an increasing percentage of society. So for example, Indeed facilitating, helping you figure out where to work, Tinder helping you find a romantic partner, Facebook having you find friends. So technology playing a greater role in these complex social phenomena is not necessarily good or bad, but certainly not neutral. These individual decisions of who you live with, where you work, they're value-laden decisions that both shape and reflect your personal values. So the technologies that facilitate these decisions for millions or some cases billions of people a day will shape and reflect the values of a society. So I think us in this course community, how I think about it, we're interested in making sure these intermediary technologies that kind of facilitate life are advancing humane technology and kind of advancing human brilliance. So if that's what we're concerned about, how can I advance humane technology? Well, there's lots of different ways you can do it. People are doing it well all over the world in lots of different ways, but I focus on three kind of focus points. So the first is the design of the technology, which is one of the main focuses of this course community. And that's work that advances humane technology by focusing on the features, the change, and the functionality and the interfaces of technology to try to make them more humane. Second, you can focus on the business model of the technology. So what are the economic incentives and business practices behind this technology that motivate the design features? And third, the values embedded in the technology. So not just what does the technology do, but what does the technology make possible? What is encoded at the core of the technology? And how can we ensure that the technology could never be misused because it's built with a certain set of values? Now, these are not firm boundaries between. It's more of just kind of a guiding heuristic to help focus your efforts as you're thinking about how to advance humane technology. And now I'll just share an example of how I've applied this to my own work. So first, I picked a complex social phenomenon that I was invested in. And in my case, it's mentor programs because I manage mentor programs at the University of Minnesota, and I've been involved in lots of other parts of life. And so a mentor program, it's an institutionally sponsored system that facilitates mentorship. It has a sponsoring institution, a program coordinator, mentees and mentors that connect to learn from each other. And like other things in society, technology is playing an increasingly prominent role in facilitating the mentor program experience. So I interview dozens of mentor program coordinators from all parts of life and try to learn how to make sure that is facilitated with humane technology. So I'm just going to share 3 examples kind of using that framework. So how does the design of a mentor program matter? So here's just an example of an interface of showing the gallery of possible mentors in a program and decisions about whether or not to include the headshot of a mentor, whether or not to include the job title or their skills. All those design decisions can change the way people experience the mentor program, whether or not they sign up for it, who they end up getting matched with, how long they stay in the program. Second, thinking about the business model consideration. So how is a mentor program funding? This kind of a joke within higher ed that like this mentor program will continue to get funding next year if A, participation increases from year over year, B, mentor program is shown to increase graduation rates, C, mentor program is shown to increase alumni giving among the volunteer mentors, or D, the whims of a new administrator. So how the program is funded, just like how social media makes money matters, how mentor programs are funded and the technologies used to facilitate them will influence everyone's experience of that technology. And then what are the values of the program? So for example, at corporations, it's common for a mentor program to exist to help improve employee retention, but it's also common for employees to get a mentor so they're more qualified to get a job at another company as soon as possible. So how can you align the values as you're building the technologies for mentor programs? And then how can the foundation's community support this research? Well, based on this research, I actually recently got a launch grant from the Entrepreneurship Center at the University of Minnesota to build a humane mentor program management platform. So I'm working on that while still doing research. So I'm interested in learning and building and sharing together. So looking to connect with designers, mentor programs that are interested in being pilot partners, and then researchers looking to co-author about mentor programs and humane technology. And there's my contact information. And with that, I'll try to figure out how to stop sharing and answer some questions. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Really great to have you here and really exciting to hear that you are exploring humane technology mentor programs specifically. Maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more on what you're looking at in that space, because I think that could be something that's of interest to a lot of other members of the course community, especially those who might be earlier in their careers or still students.
Yes. Well, I just kind of realized that mentor programs are really great. Well, the research validates that. And I think in society with so many people switching jobs right now, there's like a greater need than ever to like share wisdom from people that are new to institutions and people that just joined them or across generations. And a lot of the technologies for mentor programs specifically, I just kind of identified this disconnect that they're built for institutional goals, kind of like that example of like trying to increase student retention. And that's not really aligned with the reason that people seek mentorship. It's usually for like a personal thing. And when you think of the ancient tradition of mentorship, it's usually like stepping away from the institutions and going and finding the wise old man or woman outside of the current system. And so I'm just trying to look at how mentor technologies could facilitate both like strengthening institutions, but then empowering that kind of self-actualization outside of it. And what I'm working on is thinking of a platform that kind of can meet someone's diverse mentoring needs. So my research shows that once people experience the benefits of mentorship in one part of their life, they seek it out in other parts of their life. So how could a platform facilitate almost like Meetup, where someone could have a mentor at their company, but then be a volunteer mentor at their university, but then also maybe be a mentor at their faith group? And how could one platform kind of facilitate those kind of separate niche communities that are all part of someone's identity?
That's really fascinating and reminds me of some of the reading that I've been doing lately, just about the challenges or the dangers if we have too many of these potential support services for us as individuals baked into our work environment versus baked into other institutions or facets of our life. And if our work becomes our church or our town hall, and everything is funneled through that platform, that can be really dangerous in terms of how we connect with one another as a society. So it's really interesting and exciting to hear about you exploring how mentorship can serve that portion of our lives and identities, but also support others as well. I have one other question before we move on, and that's recognizing that you are a student and you are getting to study humane technology, or at least have that be a core part of what your broader research is. Do you have any advice for other students, up and coming students, maybe high schoolers in the audience, or people thinking about going back to school who might want to study humane technology? How can you get into that, or how can one get into that space?
Yes. So I'm in the Department of Writing Studies, or that's what I got my PhD in, which you might not have guessed, but like writing is a technology of like a communication technology. So the trajectory kind of goes from like studying writing and like arguments to like studying instant messaging and how Google Docs changes writing. But I think the framework I presented could be a helpful guide for people. So on one hand, there's actually another element to that framework. It's activists, academics, and entrepreneurs. So kind of think of how you identify there, and then think if you want to focus on design, the business models, or the values, and then identify a complex social phenomena that is important to you or that you know about. So whether it's housing or food supply or climate change or mentorship or education. And I think that can be a helpful formula to kind of make a difference in this space.
That's great. And I love that you frame writing as a form of technology. That's actually something that our co-founder Tristan Harris has talked about, is broadening the scope of what we define as a technology, more looking at the root of the word, really. And also to your point about, humane technology as like a lens for can be used as a lens to look at a lot of different issues and challenges that we face in society, in a lot of different sort of sectors of academia, and also a lot of different sectors of broader business and industry. So it's sort of something that you can layer on top of whatever other research you might be interested in or pursuing. So great all around.
Yes, thank you so much. I have lots more to say to this, but I'll move on to the next.
Well, we'll move on to the next presenter, and hopefully we can get to some more conversations at the table afterwards. Thank you again, Ryan. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide Ryan from the stage, and I'm going to invite Alexandra to come up and join us now. Alexandra from Boston, come on down. That was a Price is Right reference for some of you. It was obscure, I know. All right, we got the presentation. We've got Alexandra coming on camera as well. Great.
Hello, everyone.
Good to have you. Thanks, Alexandra. I will hide myself from the stage, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Gee whiz, you can't tell what this radio thing might go into, states Merle, a white middle-class boy, as he imagines the future of radio product design in 1922. In his design, a boy wears a radio. The set physically looms over him as he dons an antenna affixed to a helmet. His headphones encase him in his own immersive sonic world as the voice of his caregiver seeps out into the public space, framing the sides of the image. Though the commanding voice cannot directly monitor Merle, it affects Merle as he scowls and furrows his brow. The comic intermingles the past with the present and the future, as Merle presents the future of radio as a portable disciplinary device. By considering the humanities and the arts, we can look toward their utility for humane technology. This can help us investigate and check prejudice and wrestle with ambiguity. As we approach current conversations, such as those regarding age-appropriate design and children's rights, I investigate the history of childhood technology and health and safety. I focus on America from the early 20th century to today. My research draws on my training as a music historian. It delves into mass media and the arts to ask, what does it mean to be safe? As we know, problems are complex, and exploring safety necessitates dwelling in ambiguity. To examine safety in all of these different contexts, I contend that safety is culturally contingent. So how people understand and construct safety depends on their specific context and environment. Safety is historically grounded. As with cultural context, it is important to root our understanding of safety and technology in the historical moment we are examining. And safety is a socially constructed discourse. By this, I mean that we must take into account how we make meaning, how this meaning is communicated and in flux through speaking, writing, and the artifacts of popular culture and research labs. This requires looking at the perspectives of different individuals and collectives, of children, parents, educators, researchers, journalists, entertainers, and technologists, among others. As we examine this, we must also do the important work to uncover perspectives that are less amplified in the historical record, as not to do harmful erasure. To piece this together, I investigate topics from the use of Baby Shark on streaming platforms to teach kids about COVID-19 to debates over what content was safe for children as commercial radio entered American homes for the first time, to the history of how new police technologies contributed to racial and ethnic profiling. My research shows that safety required active community-wide participation, and that prejudices based on factors such as age, class, ethnicity, gender, and race undergirded safety. As an example, we can look at American radio from around the 1920s to the beginning of World War II. We see the tension of safety and its twin, danger. The medium raised concerns regarding humane technology. It blurred public and private spaces and philanthropy and profit. As it offered new possibilities for education and remote learning, it threatened to spread misinformation through marketing and war propaganda. As it crafted communities, it perpetuated biases, and as it could be used as a tool in child rearing, some questioned if it was positive for child development. To support this research, we can keep in mind lessons from the humanities and the arts. They help us address the paradigmatic assumptions guiding technology design from the course. Instead of accepting the claim that we've always had moral panics, we begin to ask questions such as, what evidence do we have? Who has had the power and privilege to determine what is ethical? What unique ethical challenges does this new technology present to society? And how will this new technology respond to its cultural context and historical legacy? The afterlives of these artifacts in songs, recordings, etc., present us with multiple futures, pointing towards both what happens when we remember and what follows when we forget. By studying the relationship between safety and prejudice, I show the long history of technology's role and how entertainment and media both help and harm society. These perspectives can animate our approaches to humane technology as we navigate the affordances of technologies, the old, the new, and the yet to be imagined. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Also, you caught me off guard with going so engaging right off the beginning there. That was fantastic. I was very attentive. As a father to a 2-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, I love that Baby Shark was referenced in your presentation today and in this session. I have lots of questions about that research, mainly because I have to listen to it so frequently, and I'm sure other folks are going to have questions about your research as well. I wanted to actually bring it back a little bit. You know, you talked about that you are in a music department, and I was just curious what sort of helped bring your research from the realm of music merging into the realm of humane technology. What was that personal evolution like for you?
Yeah, I think that definitely drawing on, and I think the humane tech movement sort of gets at this, the importance of interdisciplinarity and thinking about how cross-pollination can really help us solve some of these or get closer to solving some of these thorny issues. And so in my work, I work a lot and think a lot about both media studies and the history of science and medicine. So really thinking about how using my different tools, working in sound and working in music and the arts, can help us think through some of these issues and the intersection of entertainment and humane tech.
Love it. You know, we have a lot of creators and music enthusiasts in this course community. We actually have an affinity group focused on a more humane creator economy. And I'm curious, for folks that are interested in this intersection between media, arts, culture, music, and humane technology, do you have other resources that you would recommend that they peruse, whether it's books, podcasts, articles, research, other places that they should look for more information?
Yes, I would definitely say that there are some professional societies, such as the for popular music and for the American Musicological Society and different things. And they also have some affinity groups really delving into different topics such as gender, ethnicity, and race that can really help to animate some of these conversations.
Oh, great. Excellent. Well, I added the American Musicological Society. That's a hard one to say fast. Into the chat here. If you have others that you would recommend, please feel free to throw them into the chat. I know that folks would love to peruse those.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions or offer more resources tailored to individuals in the.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'll go ahead and hide the stage, and we'll invite up Tarini now. Okay, Tarini, you are up as soon as I can pull you up here. Here we go. One moment here. Great. Tarini, welcome, and thank you so much for being here all the way from India. I know the time zone isn't as conducive for you, so I really appreciate you making the time.
No worries. I just hope my network stays with me and does not ditch me midway. But yeah, here's to hoping.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed. And if it does, I'll just say in advance to everyone else that we will ensure that Tarini has an opportunity to record her full presentation, and we will integrate it into the recording when we share it with the full course community. So you will get to see it eventually, even if, heaven forbid, something falls out today.
Thank you so much. Please bear with me. I'll just present to audience. 1 second.
Sounds good. And I'll go ahead and hide myself from the screen.
Yeah. Just let me know when my screen's visible. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, I think it should be visible now.
It is just loading right now. I figured I'd come back up until you're good. Once you hit present, we'll, and all looks good, I'll go ahead and drop off. Okay, looking good. Go for it.
Yeah, okay, let's go. Hi, everybody. I'm Tarini, a rising senior at Flame University, Pune, and I'm majoring in psychology. So my research title for Better or for Metaverse is actually a wordplay on analyzing and weighing the pros and cons of the Proteus effect, which is a pretty underrated and overlooked concept when we're analyzing avatar in psychology. So the word Proteus is derived from the Greek god Protean, who had the ability to take on multiple self-representations. As the member of Gen Z, I have corroborated several digital representations of myself over the years, ranging from me characters, club penguins to Sims, and now even Snapchat Bitmojis. The chronology displays how the landscape has changed significantly in the way we interact online. But in order to grasp the Proteus effect, I'd start off by breaking down the different psychological theories associated with it. The first one being behavioral confirmation, which suggests that a target avatar presents itself in a way that conforms to the perceiver's expectations of it. For example, if an avatar is female, she would require to conduct herself in alignment to certain gender roles, such as posture, mannerism, etc. To sort of break down this example, I'd like you to think of it this way. You have person A and person B. The target's actions are entirely dependent on the perceiver's expectations of the same. And this also ties in well with a concept in media studies which is known as symbolic interactionism, which means that the attire, such as coats, etc., sort of exude a certain attribute that we tend to immediately make associations to, and that drastically influences our behavior online as well as offline. Several research studies on the Proteus effect suggest that people tend to embody certain traits based on their avatar's appearance. A person tends to exude a lot of confidence if they play an attractive avatar, and also dictates the proximity in web chat spaces. Isn't that insane? Secondly, avatars that are relatively tall have resulted in people who tend to negotiate more aggressively and therefore embody that trait. Similarly goes for people who wear unique attire. They tend to have more creative solutions, and the same goes for avatars that are relatively skinnier or heavier on the end. Now, what are the complications of the Proteus effect, whether it's good or bad? Let's understand it through self-perception. Self-perception theory suggests that you look at yourself and make assessments about yourself from a third-person perspective. It's quite literally stepping out of your body and looking at yourself on a virtual platform. When we're in control of the avatar, its actions and conversations, we tend to think on behalf of it as well, which ultimately leads to cognitive schemas and impact our behavior. Which means you have two different versions of yourself. You have a version of yourself that exists in real time, makes decisions, has inferences, attributes, and qualities. And you have a virtual self that has its own little world of its own in the way it presents itself. Now, getting back to the point I'd made about people acting according to their avatar's characteristics, I'd like to give you an example. Suppose in real time you're a marketer or a professional and your avatar form is tall. Chances are that you might emulate good negotiation techniques as per the research suggested. Like most things, the Proteus effect and its strength varies drastically. When you're actively in control of your avatar and you're sort of navigating through its daily life, etc., like so happens in Sims, the effect is extremely high and you tend to actually embody those traits. But if you're merely viewing it, like happens in kids' games such as Club Penguin, the effect is relatively less and it's all a matter of engagement. Now, you may ask, what are the ethics and the scope of the Proteus effect? The Proteus effect has blossomed across several platforms with the advent of AI and is only going to skyrocket. The gamification in edtech is a really good way of using Proteus effect in order to encourage positive self-image and morale. While on the flip side, the theory of behavioral confirmation could result in perpetuation of stereotypes and prejudices. And as we've learned in the foundation courses, the dissemination of fake news and media concepts ties in really well with it. In our mission to create regenerative technology to better posterity, weighing in the basics of human behavior and psychology is imperative. We can only pave the way by acknowledging human vulnerabilities and shaping our products around empowering human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarini. That was fascinating. I have to admit that was when I saw that you had submitted your presentation, that was an entirely new concept that I was learning on. But as you touched on at the end there, ties in really well to on module 2 in our course as well, or in particular about respecting human nature and thinking about how we're influenced by our online engagement and experience. One question I had for you, and I know that you're still launching into your research, but when you think about the implications or the lessons learned for product developers or video game designers, does this mean should they be using this type of learning and research to influence the types of avatars that they create for people? Is it possible that how they design those and the offerings that they present to users can have an effect on how we're treating each other online?
So, like we've seen in the foundation courses and as well as in a lot of Tristan's discussions, you have to design the product to cater to human needs and not to the AI world that sort of surrounds us. And these artificial social systems don't exist in real time and can be pretty harmful. So I think UI, UX, AI developers should bear in mind and probably make them more inclusive and diverse so that they accommodate to a larger group of people. Because what I've realized, especially with apps like Snapchat, especially when you're devising your Bitmoji, there are very restricted body types, skin tones, etc., that you can cater to. And because of which people tend to embody those traits, and you see a negative side to Proteus. But again, there is a positive side to it. But I think the cons sort of outweigh the pros as of now. But again, we're on a mission to flip that over. So here's hoping.
Yeah, there's some really tricky ethical decisions there about the options that you give to people and what and depending on if they're trying to embody an avatar that is not like them or versus one that does represent them in the real world, and then how they engage with those as well. So some really interesting ethical decisions that come up. Sounds fascinating. One more question for you, and one that I've kind of posed to some of the other folks, is what brought you into this research? How did you get interested in this space in the first place?
So I've always been really fascinated by the digital world, and I pursue my major is psychology. So I've always been really interested in the intersection of, tech and psychology, and that's kind of what led me to the Center for Humane Tech. And I think it was just me, just I use social media on an everyday basis, and you sort of, you use Memojis, you use Bitmojis on an everyday basis, and we don't really weigh in the importance of their implications on us, right? And it was just a simple Google search away, and I was sort of blown away that there was a whole theoretical concept behind it. So that's kind of what got me into the research, and I hope to advance in it a little more. So yeah.
I am definitely going to be looking at Bitmojis and emojis and avatars quite differently going forward. So this is very opening. Well, thank you so much. It's great to have you here. I really appreciate
Thank you for having me.
Great. I'll hide you from the screen now. And our last presenter is going to come up, Deborah.
Awesome. Hi. It's working. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone.
Getting smarter as we go. It was great.
Yeah, this is awesome. Cool. I'll just start sharing my screen. And I have to also acknowledge these other 3 presentations have been absolutely amazing. Thanks for sharing those. Looking forward to sharing what I'm working on, but really glad to have a chance to have heard y'all's. Is it showing? Okay, cool, Colin. All right, so hi, I'm Deborah. I'm working with an organization called Restate, so I'm not doing academic research right now, and we are working on a project called the Future of Governance Toolkit. So before I dive into what this all is, I want to chat a little bit about like why this work is important right now. Why are we looking at governance? We can see that nowadays there are many challenges we're facing when it comes to how we coordinate as a species, and we are not reaching our potential and actually kind of going backwards in some ways. And some folks say it's due to this rapid kind of development in technology that has not been kind of paralleled by rapid development in morality, and in how we coordinate. And so this research tries to get into a little bit more as to what is actually going on in the spaces of governance. So I think one of our big questions right now is what are the building blocks to building humane digital civilizations? Because a lot of stuff is moving to digital spaces. And there's a lot that we can learn that maybe we do not want to replicate that we see in kind of everyday spaces. So the purpose of the toolkit is to actually co-create a place for communities of all sizes to learn about participatory governance practices from each other. This is because when we've spoken to different communities around the world, whether they're governments, private cities, or online communities, a lot of them will ask us, hey, that's cool that you're looking at governance, but we just want some suggestions on what kind of ways of governance that we can use for our current situation. So at Restate, we thought, okay, let us actually start developing a toolkit. And I mean, what is governance? I think is a pretty big, broad question. And we look at it from these 3 pillars. So the first is looking at how do we make decisions together? The second is what are ways to resolve conflict together? And then finally is looking at different ways of transacting and exchanging, kind of the economic lens. And so some examples of some of these case studies that we're looking at from around the world include things like quadratic voting in Colorado. In Iceland, they rewrote the constitution. In Switzerland, there's an interesting sort of decentralized canton structure. In Detroit, there's time banks. And so looking at these different case studies and actually starting to document it and put it in one place so that it can inspire others to look at these cases that are already happening all over the world, but may not always be well known. Sorry, my computer is very slow. To be included in this toolkit, we will evaluate based on 4 or more criteria, such as ethical implications, existing successful use cases, level of governance innovation, and finally, level of participation intention. The first one especially, I would say, is very relevant to this community is the ethical implications of each of these tools. So we know no technology is not neutral, and we need to think about what ways we are actually, what kind of systems we're creating to have folks be able to come together and make decisions and work together to build community. And all those different ways, even how this particular session is structured, kind of indicates the values of the particular community. And so within a whole slew of governance tools, we'll only include like a smaller set within this toolkit. And even within that toolkit, we will be looking at specific case study. We'll be tagging each of these case studies with characteristics such as the outcomes, the size of the community, the function of government, and of course the stated and expressed values of the community, because that is incredibly different for every context. As Alexandra mentioned earlier, safety is culture is relevant to the culture, and we have to start thinking the same thing about governance systems as well and different tools. And so in terms of the methodology, we're looking at, what is like looking at a 3-pronged system where we have the toolkit itself, and then included in that, we have the research team, the community research, and the visionary board. The research team will be a formalized team working together, building this database. The visionary board will be folks who are thought leaders and practitioners in this space, will help guide the vision for where this toolkit will go and contribute their expertise and knowledge. And community research is actually where I'm quite excited about, is we'll offer the opportunity for different community members to just kind of pop in and add their different inputs to the toolkit. So it's something that's alive and functioning and useful for folks, because we want this to feel like it's something valuable and relevant. One thing I realized I didn't have a slide on this is maybe a bit more of an example of one of the governance case studies that I'm mentioning. And I see that Kellen mentioned the Taiwan case. So I think this is interesting to highlight a little bit. So in Taiwan, the digital minister, Audrey Tang, well, Taiwan's a very interesting case study in general, but one initiative they tried was doing deliberation at scale. And so what they did is Uber was coming to Taiwan, and the question was, how do we make sure that the regulations around Uber are aligned with all of the different stakeholders involved? So that includes potential customers, the Uber company themselves, taxi drivers, of course, and the unions, government officials and kind of city planners, all those different folks. And in many cases, there might be a workshop where people would come together in person to have a discussion around how that would work. Taiwan decided, hey, let's try something different where we invite like a huge number of people to give input, but in a more guided way, in a way that utilizes maybe some technologies that help us be able to organize all the different inputs that we'll receive. So they used a technology called Polis, which uses machine learning to basically gather insights from folks and then group people together based on the kind of inputs that they've shared. So all the people who might think Uber is too expensive, or no, sorry, taxis are too expensive, I want something cheaper. Maybe that's one group. Another group might be like, I had to pay a lot of money to get my taxi license and go through a long training. So I think Uber is too cheap and it's like undercutting my business. That might be another group. And so what this software ends up doing, though, is over time, it's kind of like a game. People want to get the most agreement with their statement. And so people will start to get more and more nuanced with what their statement is, which can then start to become something like, hey, like, I think it's important to make sure that Uber is affordable for more and more people, but I also think it makes sense for the taxi drivers to have enough infrastructure and enough support to continue on with their work as well. And more people might agree with something like that, as opposed to the other statements, which are much more polarizing. So Polis is a very cool technology that can be used for that kind of thing. And so we're looking for those kind of case studies around how people are trying to make decisions in more participatory ways. And so if you're interested to get involved, we're actually in our first month. So that's, it's very different from the other presentations who I think are much more established. So that's why I learned a lot more from y'all than maybe from me. And I welcome your different case studies and examples that you're excited about. We are currently recruiting. We have funding, like compensation for the research team. So if you'd like to nerd out on governance structures, please email me. And later on, when we have the community research portion open, I would love to have y'all kind of hop in and join in a more formalized way. But in the meantime, of course, feel free to just reach out. That's my email there, and just say hello. And yeah, happy to chat about governance or about restate in general. So thank you. I think that is it.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That's super exciting and great that there's such a great opportunity for folks in our course community or just from broader communities to participate in this research going forward. I dropped your email in the chat as well. And for all the other presenters, if you would be willing to put your email or contact information in the chat, if you're open to sharing that, that'll just make it easier than for folks having to type it down from your presentations. Deborah, I had a couple of questions for you. First, I was wondering actually if you could talk a little bit about the Restate Foundation, because you're the only presenter today that isn't affiliated with an academic institution. So what is the Restate Foundation?
Yeah, sure. So Restate Foundation is a Swiss foundation looking at reimagining the future of governance. So as we No, governance is normally seen as part of the problem, the main problem of how we humans interact, but we actually think governance could be a big part of the solution. So how do we kind of shift that mindset? What kind of system structures, values do we need to infuse into governance in order to push it to new boundaries?
That's excellent. And when you say governance, is there a particular level or scale of governance that you're looking at, either as an organization or with this research in particular? Like, is this supposed to apply more to like state level governance, or looking more at like community level? What are you considering?
So we're actually looking at all different sizes of communities. So one thing to really nerd out about with this toolkit is the taxonomy and those tags that I mentioned very, very briefly, and thinking about how do we actually make those tags relevant so that different communities of different sizes can go and with different values, different kind of desire to engage in different governance tools. Some governance tools obviously take a lot more time for everybody to deal with. Others are a bit more straightforward. And so all those different factors, we want to find ways for people to help them find tools that would be useful to their context.
That's great. At the end of this month, I'm moving from my current home in Portland, Oregon, to a small town in Central Oregon that has 3,500 people and no stoplights. So I'm both very excited to get into local governance in a smaller town, but also I'm just curious about some of the distinct challenges between governance at a large metropolitan area and a small, very small community. So looking forward to learning some more from your research in the future. I had one more question for you, and then we'll open up the table so everybody can chat with everyone. Curious about creating open source toolkits, because that's something that we sometimes think about within the humane technology community as a way to democratize, research, learnings, access, make it more equitable. But I imagine that there are some challenges that go into creating an open source platform or toolkit to ensure that it is successful and usable, such as the taxonomy challenges that you mentioned. Can you talk about any other unique challenges of creating open source resources that you've encountered thus far, or things that are maybe not challenges but opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, one is governance in general of the open source toolkit, right? When you work in governance, it all gets very meta. But yeah, it actually is a big challenge. It's like, who gets to decide whether something should be included, what those tags should be, how are we going to do that, and should we refresh it every year, every few months? So these are some of the challenges that we're working through right now. And again, people who are excited to discuss these kind of challenges, please reach out to me. Happy to have a longer chat and would love to hear your different thoughts on what would make sense for open source communities. And also, I think Nadia, her last name escaped me, wrote a really great book about open source communities that I've been referencing a lot.
That is excellent. If you
I'll let me.
Yeah, if you come up with I had it top of mind, but I guess I don't. If you have the link and are willing to drop that into the chat as well, that would be great.
Yes.
This is also what your presentation. I'm glad we wrapped with this one, because this is a great teaser for an upcoming presentation that we're going to be having later in the month. We are still finalizing the details, but it'll be, or the exact date and time, but it'll be the week of August 22nd, most likely. And that's going to be having New Public come as a guest speaker. New Public is an organization that is looking at creating better digital public spaces. So thinking a lot about governance and how various communities, nations, et cetera, can have healthy online public spaces that are accessible to all, and how we can make those inclusive and equitable, et cetera. And so, if you're really interested in the type of work and learnings that Deborah mentioned today, would encourage you to keep an eye on our course calendar, and that event will be hosted there very soon. I should be hopefully locking it in today. Deborah, thank you so much. This is really interesting work that you're doing. I'm going to just say a few more things here, and then we'll pivot to table so that y'all can chat with everyone else. Thank you again.
Cool. Thanks, Kellen.
Well, as someone said in the chat here, every time we have one of these sessions, we end up, I feel like, with more tabs open and more learnings than when we started, and that feels like a win to me. I certainly learned some new things despite being actively in this space. So I'm really excited. Thank you to all of our presenters today, and I know that there are many of you within our course community that are students, professors, academics, researchers working at non-academic institutions, but doing a lot of interesting toolkits, or developing a lot of interesting toolkits and other resources that might be of interest to this course community. Would welcome you dropping in any into the chat that you might want to share now. If you'd like to share those later or have them accessible to other folks in the course community, please feel free to email me My email is course@humanetech.com, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And that's the type of resources that we'd love to consider either adding into our course or creating other dashboards that are accessible to all of you in the future so that you can learn more from one another. That's really something that we're eager to cultivate. One other external resource that I wanted to highlight that's very aligned with this this work around research and learning and how it influences humane technology is the Pro-Social Design Network. I will put a link to them in the chat as well, but they, and I'm quoting here, curate and research evidence-based design solutions to bring out the best in human nature online. And they have their own community, which they host on Slack, which is designed to connect academics with product developers and designers so that those designers can actually learn from academics and the data-driven research that they can offer around building better technology. So if you're interested in this space, I would encourage you to go sign up for their Slack community. I mentioned our upcoming events. I know a lot of folks dropped other great links and resources and readings into the chat as well, so would encourage you to take a look at that. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pause the presentations and invite you all to join us at tables. There's a variety of tables where you can meet with each of the individual presenters and some other tables where you can just do a general meet and greet, and I'll be popping around there as well. Thank you so much for your attention today, for your engagement and enthusiasm. And if you can find the emoji button at the bottom, which I'm going to consider very closely now, thanks to Tarini, but why don't we give a round of applause, even though they're not on stage, but a round of applause to all the presenters. I'm going to do a clap and a firework here as well. I hope that was aligned with my own values. Thank you again, everyone. This was great. And I hope to see you again soon at a future CHT Foundations course community event.